He's been doing all sorts of drugs, but he's addicted to crystal meth, which seems to be the worst of all of them. And I guess I'm here because I just want to know all that I can. There are moments that I look at him, this kid that I raised, who I thought I knew inside and out, and I wonder who he is.
Beautiful Boy opens with part of a future scene that'll play later in the film, but the first time we see it, we aren't given the whole scene and we aren't given any context. It's a single, continuous, slow zooming shot into a nervous man stumbling through his monologue. The reason we're seeing this scene is to hear David ask these two questions.
What is it doing to him? And what can I do to help him?
It cuts to black before we hear the answers. We don't know the answers yet, and neither does David. This scene and the two questions asked present the conflict of the film. They're also the subject of David's book. The dilemma is, what should you do when someone you care about is so hell-bent on destroying themselves? I've wanted to talk about this film for a while now, and I've been trying to write this video for literally months, but I haven't known where to start, and I still don't really. I want to try and convey how important this story is because the effect it's had on me I don't think is like anything else. I don't just mean the film, but the books it's based on. My attention span is awful, so sometimes I really struggle maintaining interest in reading a book from front to back. But reading David and Nick's books is the fastest I've ever read anything. On the surface level, it's just an interesting story that's written in an interesting way. But on a deeper level, it goes into painful detail about really important issues that don't get enough attention. And so I'm going to talk about this film and why I think it's a good representation of drug addiction, and also how well it conveys emotion. So after the opening scene I discussed, we fade into the beginning of the story and the actual opening of the movie. I think this shot of Nick's empty bedroom is really great because we can understand so much about the person who lives out of this room simply just by taking a good look at it. It's only a 5-second shot, but it's so useful in establishing a character which is yet to be seen. More importantly though, we see that it's empty, and when it cuts to David sighing in the doorway, we already understand the relationship between these two characters. We see David take up the role of the concerned father, worrying relentlessly about his son whose whereabouts become almost always unknown. We hear the film's soundtrack in this opening sequence for the first time as well, and it is legitimately one of the best movie soundtracks I've ever heard, and I wouldn't rank this film so highly without it. The music captures so brilliantly the stress and anxiety of these situations that I can imagine so vividly what Nick and David are feeling in these scenes. The first music we hear is the track Helican 1 by Mogwai. It begins as this slow echoey guitar, but it slowly builds throughout the opening scenes, and the climax is made so loud by these crashing drums. I really don't like talking about music on this channel because I think it becomes very evident that I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But I think in this case I don't need to. My point is that it gives me an idea about how I should be feeling. It makes me reflect, and it has a sense of uncertainty and foreboding. Nick is introduced in this sequence through flashbacks, which I think is meaningful because we're seeing Nick as he was when he was younger. He's happy and full of optimism, which is how David knows and remembers him. It also then provides quite a stark contrast between bright young Nick and the depressed, drug-addicted Nick we meet in the next scene. Nick's first attempts at rehab don't yield any positive results, mainly due to the fact that he doesn't believe that it's necessary. When he looks around, he sees these old, jaded men who have been in and out of prison and who have been using drugs recklessly for decades. Nick can't relate his situation to these people at all. He's only 18 at this point and believes he's justified in some experimentation with drugs. He also can't grasp the concept that what he has is an incurable disease. The truth that Nick has to learn to accept is that he isn't like normal people when it comes to using drugs or alcohol casually in a social environment. Though it may start out as that, it will inevitably lead him down a path of destruction. David too suffers from a lack of understanding Nick's situation. Though David himself has a significant past experience with drugs, for him it really was about experimentation. He doesn't know why Nick continues to use them when their negative effects are so obvious. And after Nick escapes his first rehab, David scoffs at the idea that
relapse is a part of recovery.
Relapse is part of recovery?
Yeah, it's a part of Nick's learning process.
Well, that's like saying crashing is part of pilot training.
Whilst the woman on the phone comes off quite inconsiderate and carefree, she is at least somewhat right, because although at this current point in time Nick has relapsed and is ignorant to the fact that he's destroying his own life, he'll eventually use these experiences as the basis for determining the truth, which is that he does have a problem, and what he's doing isn't fun anymore. It's this realization paired with Nick's own potential that I think drives him to sobriety in the beginning, even if it doesn't last long. Nick's decision to return to college and pursue a normal life is interrupted by his overpowering desire to be absent from reality. He still isn't ready to be sober yet, and the freedom of living on his own allows him to slip back into his habit. This next scene is to me the most amazing of the film. It's horrifying and yet also beautiful. Nick's experience of using drugs is visualized and we gain some understanding of the appeal for him. The camera is completely focused on Nick and everything around him is blurred. The gas lamps in the background are blurred, creating this euphoric lighting. People can also be seen, turning their heads to judge Nick, but they're also blurred and don't matter. Nick is completely alone in his own world, and if using drugs were like this all the time, there would be no issue, but it's not. This beautiful 48-second scene sits amongst 2 hours of screaming, crying, and worrying. This is the point, because although using drugs provides a respite, it's only brief, and it would be ultimately much easier for everyone to stand in the face of your issues. Nick finally does. He gets 14 months clean, and it's not easy, but he's able to get back most of what he lost, and even more. A job working in a rehab, an apartment, a car, but most importantly, when his family invites him to stay with them, we see that he seems to be regaining the trust of his family. The chef house in this film was used very purposefully. It not only reflects the real chef house, but because it's such a warm and cozy place. It's made from almost all wood and glass, there's leather furniture and plants everywhere. In essence, it's just very natural and welcoming, the exact opposite of Nick's chef and how he feels when he's here. It, I think, emphasizes how much Nick doesn't feel he belongs in his surroundings, whilst also showing how well off his family is financially. Whenever he's here, he doesn't want to be. He did like San Francisco and Point Reyes, but he hated going back to his home there. Were it not for how much he valued his relationship with his family, I don't think he'd go back. And besides, he's on the right track to obtaining a real life. All that remains is building back the relationships he burned. But David really shows his lack of trust when he asks Nick to do a drug test after he comes home late. And Karen doesn't trust Nick to supervise her young son in the ocean. Also, this reminder from Jasper certainly doesn't help Nick to feel like a person who has grown.
I thought you might be different, but you're just the same old Nick.
The truth is, Nick will always be an addict. Despite how long he's been sober for, he'll continue to have the urge to use. It's wholly his own responsibility to discover ways in which to best help him resist it. As Nick leaves his family, he feels this urge. He does what he knows he should, He tries to breathe and he calls his sponsor. But when his words don't ease Nick's pain, he turns to what he knows will. This shot of Nick sitting with himself after having relapsed again says it all. You can really feel his sense of regret, but at the same time, he's already started down this road. He's thrown away his sobriety, so he might as well keep going. This is where part 1 of Nick's book Tweak picks up from. It details this month-long bender one day at a time, and you get to experience the absolutely fucked situations he gets into, and how he only barely manages to escape them. I really recommend reading it. As Nick once again allows drugs to overcome him, David begins to accept that maybe he can't help Nick anymore. Karen needs David. David's younger kids need David. Nick's childhood is over. He is his own person, and this young family can't suffer anymore as a result of the decisions made by Nick.
You be reasonable.
I am being reasonable.
Is this reasonable?
Oh, no, it's not! How can I be? My son is out there somewhere, and I don't know what he's doing! I don't know how to help him!
You can't!
In spite of the fact that David feels guilty about Nick's situation, he didn't cause it, he can't control it, and he can't cure it. This woman speaks beautifully about how, although an addict may still be alive, you begin mourning for them not when they die, but when they become an addict, because that's when they cease being the person that they were. David wants to bring an end to this never-ending cycle of mourning that he's trapped in by forgetting Nick. And although he tries, he's never really ready to give up on Nick, even when there is so little hope for recovery. And so the film ends as it began, with uncertainty.
Is this the little girl I carry? Is this the little boy